Hello again, everyone. So today I want to talk about the CPS agenda. Now some of this might only be my own opinion or stuff I found in research from former caseworkers or CPS employees, and we might briefly touch over like some other theories. But you know, the main thing is focusing on what motivates CPS to take children rather than actually protecting children. So I believe the main motivation to be money. It certainly appears to be that way. Because there's many cases where they leave actually abused children in bad situations, and they take perfectly healthy and loved children out of the home that they are in with loving parents or family members. So money, I believe, would be the main motivation. And why is that? Well, in case you didn't know, CPS gets money for every child that they seize. That includes the ones that, you know, they eventually bring back home. As soon as CPS seizes a child from the home, they receive money for that child. They also receive more money for children that have to be placed in foster care. The foster homes receive money for every child that they have. Mind you, parents aren't helped financially at all in most cases, yet foster homes do receive money for the children that they have. And finally, adoption. This is where they make the most money, and caseworkers who recommend adoption for their cases and successfully adopt out a child from one of their cases, they receive bonus checks for every child that they adopt out. So it definitely appears that money is a huge motivation. That's just, you know, looking at it from a small scale, I guess. Like, there's other theories that involve like a bigger, more so conspiracy theory type thing, which I'm trying to avoid getting into all that, but I will mention some of those theories, just, you know, to give you an idea. Which I don't know how much of them that I believe or not, but all the ones that I listed seem to be, how would you say, they are relevant to mention and seem to be most likely out of all of the ones that I've heard and researched. Now, the other thing is that the majority of children that are in foster care waiting to be adopted, not just children in foster care, but the ones that have been deemed adoptable and they are trying to adopt out, the majority of them are under the age of 5. And another statistic, 25% of children waiting to be adopted in foster care are under a year old. Having said that, it's highly likely that, or it appears to be that CPS targets younger children because younger children are more adoptable, and also to children that aren't having issues, like say mental issues from being in an abused home and behavioral problems and stuff. Children that are from a healthy, loving home are easier to adopt out because they don't have as many issues. And the younger a child is when they are taken from the home, the less likely they will have behavioral issues or mental issues, at least during childhood, during their early years of development. It won't be noticed until they are grown, because most children that were adopted even at a very young age end up having some kind of mental issue in adult life. Probably, I would say because of having issues with their own identity. There's a loss of identity whenever a child is removed from family. But younger children are less likely to show the signs of that loss, that trauma of losing their family, and are easier to adjust into a new home with a new family. And so I believe that is why CPS targets younger children, is because they are more adoptable. They are more profitable. So yes, so CPS are selling children. They are in the business of selling children. They're basically legal human trafficking. And more or less, the organization as a whole, from my experience and from my research, appear to be anti-family and pro-adoption. So briefly, I want to get into some other theories. Again, don't judge me based on these theories, because I just picked the most relevant ones out of all the years of research I've had about conspiracy theories and what the CPS Agenda actually is, because I was actually studying this organization before I became involved with them, unfortunately. So, one of the things would be, I'm going to go from like probably the most likely to the more extreme, but it's still relevant because I actually relate to it. So, programming. Okay. Well, you know, the whole point of public school appears to be to program our children. For one, you really don't learn much while you're in public school outside of basic stuff you learn in elementary school. So the majority of the time in school seems to be for the sake of programming, really, is all there is. You're taught to, you know, sit in one spot for so many hours a day, and, you know, whenever you're told to do this, you go and do that. You know, you and your group get up and move over here in a single file line or whatever, you know. And, you know, it's basically, well, like from my own experience, when you join the military, they typically keep you up for like 3 days so that you're broken down mentally and physically, so it's easier to program you. Like, they even tell you this. And so basically that's what public school is for, is to program our children. And the ones that are resistant to their programming, I actually was one of the children who was, but I was never really like, they tried to get me diagnosed with something. I was never diagnosed with anything because I actually did exceptionally well in school, and so it was hard for them to try to prove any kind of diagnosis. But I believe that's why we have the diagnosis of ADD and ADHD. Maybe some other stuff. I haven't looked into all the facts as far as autism or anything like that. That might be just a totally different thing. But I know for sure as far as ADD and ADHD and other mental disorders that they label children this to discredit them later in life, and so that, well, they label them this because they are resistant to their programming. And like what the point of that programming is, I'm not exactly sure, but you kind of think of it like the Divergent series or whatever. It's basically kind of like that. Anyone who shows any uniqueness, any different abilities than their normal students are usually labeled with some kind of disorder. And a lot of times too, when they become involved with CPS, these children end up being the ones who go from foster home to foster home because they are resistant to CPS's programming with being like, okay, these are your new parents. And it's like, no, these aren't my new parents. You know, like, I know who my parents are, and you're not going to convince me to go along with this just for the sake of going along. You know, they are resistant to this. And so they end up being labeled with a slew of disorders, and they end up becoming homeless and or in jail at a very early age. As a matter of fact, like 20% of children in foster care, that's like if they go into foster care today, if 20% of them, if they stay by the age of 18, they will be homeless. A lot of foster homes kick children out as soon as they stop receiving a check for them. The more proof of this programming theory, which, like I said, I really kind of relate to because it makes a lot of sense, just by studying our society and everything, and what I experienced through childhood and observed as a child with other children who were targeted by the system. Children that they raise, the state raises, that are adopted, usually end up being less open-minded and more like a machine or a robot. It's almost scary. It kind of reminds you of the Stepford Wives. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with the book or the movie, but essentially it's almost as though they take our children. I'm not saying this is what happens, because, you know, the brain is very malleable, especially in small children. But in a lot of the cases where, you know, you see a child, they're this way, they're a real child, they go into the system, and then they come out after being adopted, they come out as this adult who seems to be nothing like the child that left. It's as though the life has been taken out of them and they were replaced with a robot. But like I said, I'm not saying that they were replaced with a robot, because that's probably a little bit too conspiracy theory and sci-fi-esque. But I think it's due to the programming that goes on, because, you know, a lot of these families that they're adopted to, they are like the Stepford Wives. They're not real people. Or they don't act like real people, you know. I don't know. There's just a lot of falsehood about them and fakeness about them that is kind of hard for me to put my finger on, which maybe I'll do more research on and address when I have the vocabulary and ability to talk more about that. The other one that is another theory that's a little bit more out there is the Rh negative theory, which basically means that people who are Rh negative or carriers of the Rh negative blood type are targeted more. I have seen the statistics. It is true, or appears to be true, that Rh negative people are targeted more than Rh positive people. Now, of course, the theory behind this is, if you know anything about the Rh negative factor of blood types, it basically means that like the Rh negative factor is of an alien source, whether that be extraterrestrial or however you want to look at that. It's not from the monkey gene that they say we are to have evolved from or be related to, whereas the Rh positive blood type is, and they cannot trace the Rh negative blood factor gene. They cannot trace where it came from, and it's believed that this is alien DNA. And for the people who are Rh negative, it means that the gene, the alien gene, is active. And so maybe it's possible that they are targeted more because there's this theory that they may be trying to either eradicate the Rh negative bloodlines. Only the elites are, you know, exempt from this because they want to be the only ones with this special gene. That's just one of the theories. As far as, you know, why Rh negative people seem to be targeted more than others, I don't really think it goes that far. It possibly could. There's definitely a bigger picture to all of this, I'm sure, that I am just not aware of and don't have the access to learn about or know about these things. So from my limited research on this, I believe it goes back with the whole programming theory, where people who, that like maybe people who are Rh negative are more resistant, or their gene carries that same resistant gene maybe. I don't know. I'm not sure why Rh negative people are targeted more. Now, the reason why I included this is because I do relate to it, because I am O negative myself. So I just thought that was just kind of a weird coincidence to find in the years of doing my research. I actually found that out while I was fighting for my children and doing more research on CPS, because even though I knew the system was corrupt as far as the CPS organization, I did not realize just how corrupt they were until I became involved with them and I started seeing the things that they were doing. Okay. Moving on. Yes, I took notes. That's why you see me keep looking down. It's because I took some notes, because this is a lot to cover and talk about. So, one of the things from my research and from my own personal experience and my years of studying psychology, I've studied psychology, let's see, it's only been a couple years that I haven't been studying it, so it would be about 12 or more years that I've been studying psychology, or that I did study psychology, almost exclusively. I did study other things, but I almost exclusively studied psychology, as well as some medical stuff, because you kind of need to know some medical things if you're going to study psychology, in my opinion. They kind of go hand in hand. So, the CPS workers, definitely the ones I was involved with, but from the other stories that I have heard, even from people who were CPS workers themselves and were actually on the inside and could see what was going on and see other caseworkers, have reported this. But in general, these child protective workers, they exhibit a significant amount of traits with certain personality disorders. Actually, several personality disorders, but the three I'm going to talk about, they're kind of very similar, so it's kind of hard to separate them, but it's the ones that I am most familiar with and noticed in my caseworker, mainly the last one, Stephanie Johnson, who blatantly told me she was pro-adoption and anti-family. She out and out told me that. Narcissistic personality disorder. A great many of them are narcissists. And I don't mean this in the pop culture reference of how everyone's going crazy about, narcissists and saying that, if you take a lot of pictures, you're a narcissist or something like that. Like, that's kind of the superficial meaning of narcissist, but this goes much deeper than that. They have grandiose idealizations of themselves. Many of the social workers that I've seen, it's almost as though, like, they thought that the case was all about them and what a great caseworker they are, and look at how many children I was able to adopt out this year, and they expect a lot of admiration. They have this constant need for admiration, which I noticed that in CPS workers too. It's like, constantly tell me that I'm doing a good job, which one of the ways they tell them they're doing a good job is by giving them bonus checks for every child that they adopt out. Which I may have jumped ahead on that. I don't know. Did I already mention that? But yes, they receive bonus checks for every child that they adopt out. So this makes the narcissistic caseworker feel good about themselves. It's a reward to them telling them that they are doing a good job. On top of that, just in general in society, they expect to be praised by everyone as these selfless, bleeding heart heroes of children, when they're actually the abusers of children, which a true narcissist is an abuser. They abuse the people that are around them. They use people. And another trait is that they lack empathy. And I guess they experience emotions differently than other people. It seems like the only emotions they really experience is anger is the main one. A lot of the caseworkers that I noticed, just the thought or the fear that I might get my child back or whatever, or that they might be called out on what they're doing. Like, you could just see this boiling, raging anger that was like underneath this cool disposition. They're very negative people. They also, narcissists put people against each other, and CPS does this all the time. They try to get daddy to say this about mommy and mommy to say this about daddy, and basically they try to turn the family unit themselves against each other, basically promising all of them, all of the people involved, whether they're blood related or not, promising all the people involved that they will get to have the children if you'll speak badly about this person, you know, that if you'll help us take the child from this woman, then we'll, you know, or this father, you know, mother or father, either one, like maybe they're a couple, maybe they're not together. But basically, if you help us take the children from the parents, then we'll give you the child, you know, and just all this. So they cause families to fight against each other rather than for families to stay together and stay strong in spite of CPS threatening all of them. And they also project their own low self-image on other people and their own flaws on other people. So, like, say a CPS worker or whatever, like I think mine was from an interracial marriage that didn't work out, or union. I don't know if they were married, but she had a mixed child. And so they might project that onto other people of that, you know, maybe she's racist against black families now, or black fathers particularly because she feels some way about the way her relationship ended. Or, you know, you have where maybe their parents weren't great parents, and so they're like, all parents are bad. And that's a general theme you will see throughout CPS, is they truly believe that family is bad, especially parents, that parents are bad. And they try to tell society this too, which I'll get to my findings on that here in a little bit. So that's just, yeah, they're very arrogant as well, and they're also liars, which kind of also goes into the next trait that they exhibit a lot, disposition that they have. They, a majority of them I noticed appeared to be sociopathic. They didn't just lack empathy, but they seemed to lack emotions entirely. And they normally spoke in a monotone voice. So, one of the things that was used against me was that I had a variety of voices and everything. I try to hide that a lot now because of that, which I'm starting to get more comfortable with being myself, as far as my voice, but for many years I tried to hide my accents and my different voices because they used that against me and was really the sole reason for them to take my children. They claimed that it was proof of multiple personality disorder. Well, I disagree with that. For one, they're not psychologists, and most of them don't have any experience in psychology beyond an associate degree level. And they're also coming from a biased opinion of, I want to take this person's child. And most of them, they actually spoke in a monotone voice where, I mean, their voice basically never changed. There was never any display of emotion. It stayed the exact same level the whole time. Every caseworker I ever seen seemed to be completely void of emotions. And let's see, shallow emotions. So yeah, any kind of emotions they may have had, for one, you couldn't really see it other than just like I said, like this intense anger that you could just see underneath the surface, like they're just seething at their teeth with hatred for families, especially parents. Pretty much anyone that actually loves the child that's involved, they seem to have a really strong hatred towards. And they also show a lack of remorse for the children that they are constantly harming, but with their actions. But yeah, any emotions they seem to have seem to be well, like I said, I didn't even see any emotions. So if they do have any, they're very shallow, muted emotions. Now, the thing is with sociopaths is their actions are usually of a more criminal nature than a lot of CPS workers, which CPS workers do commit crimes on a daily basis, but I'm talking about more obvious crimes, such as, you know, robbing a bank or something. I don't know. Having a violent outburst. So it's less likely for a sociopath to be a caseworker than, say, the next personality disorder I want to point out, which is a psychopath. You would think that would actually be the opposite just because of the way it sounds. Like psychopath just sounds like they would be more violent and dangerous than a sociopath, which they are more dangerous. Don't ever mistake that. They are. But sociopaths have a harder time holding down a job or maybe going through school and stuff than a psychopath would, because psychopaths have the ability to just fake it. They fly under the radar very easily because they often will mirror other people's emotions back to them when they themselves have no emotions. A lot, like I said, a lot of these disorders, they kind of have some similar traits, like the lack of empathy, disregard for others, and putting their self first. So for psychopaths, they have a lack of empathy, guilt, consciousness, and remorse. Now, the difference between a sociopath and a psychopath is a sociopath knows right from wrong. Like, they do know right from wrong. And they have some kind of conscience. Whereas a psychopath does not have a conscience. They do not know right from wrong. They only knows what serves them. They only know what is beneficial to them, what suits them best, and they couldn't care less who it hurts. Like, literally couldn't care less who it hurts. And they're also very manipulative, which a lot of these personality disorders are. Constant lying. Pretty much a psychopath's entire life is a lie. They're fake. And unlike a sociopath, they have the ability to pretend to care. And so they can appear to be caring to, say, the general population, while really they're only thinking, how can I benefit from this? And the system, the way it is now, the CPS organization rewards people like this by encouraging the destruction of families by providing bonus checks and stuff for these caseworkers who are supposed to be helping families. They're supposed to be healing families and helping children. They're supposed to be actually protecting children. Whereas instead, they are leaving children who need help because they can't adopt those children. They're messed up in the head. And they're taking healthy children and messing them up in the head and abusing them by removing them from a healthy environment and putting them into an unhealthy environment, because there's a lot of foster homes that are very unhealthy. Very much so. Most children are abused in foster homes, which they try to say that, less than 1% are abused in a foster home? Did you ask any of the foster children if they felt abused? No, you didn't. Instead, they try to cover their tracks, which is another reason why I don't have a lot of websites and statistics with me right now, because I'm having a hard time finding some of the ones that I had access to during my case. Because as far as CPS, it's been a few years since I've studied on them, because, you know, once I got to the end of my case, it was kind of pointless. I felt it was pointless. And I even felt like I couldn't do this channel anymore because I wasn't successful. And I felt like I couldn't, that how could I continue to do this channel and help other people fight CPS when I myself did not win my fight. But I actually realize now that me losing my case has actually made me have a desire to help others even more so, whereas if I would have won my case, it's possible I would have forgotten about the channel entirely and just enjoyed getting to be a mom again, So, that's the way I choose to try to look at things anyway. But, okay, so, just a disclaimer, I am not saying that all caseworkers have these personality disorders, and I'm not saying that they're all evil. There's a lot of caseworkers who are really trying to do good, but most of the people who go into this field intending to help other people and to protect children and help families, most of them do not last long in this field, either because they are fired or they quit once they realize the corruption of this organization. So if you would like any more research on this, Nancy Schaefer's CPS reform, that's some good information to look up on. She was actually assassinated by the CPS organization. Not anyone in particular that I know of, but she was actually fighting for CPS reform, and she ended up, her and her husband were murdered. And they tried to cover that up. I think they tried to say at one point that it was a suicide homicide. But, and the tape that she had that was to be released to the public about her investigations of CPS suddenly went missing too. So, not a conspiracy theorist, but that doesn't really sound right, Doesn't make sense. And from my own research, it seems to be in the last several years that CPS is covering up their mistakes even more than they normally do, because they are constantly covering up their mistakes. They try to, like any child that dies in foster care or dies under the eyes of social services or CPS, it goes uninvestigated majority of the time. It is not looked into at all. And they cover it up. They don't want to report how many children are dying in foster care each year. And as a matter of fact, when some statistics have come out about it, they have now taken those statistics and changed it so that they say, like the reports of violence and stuff like that, they try to make it where it includes parents. So now the statistics are all messed up because you're including biological parents and foster parents in the same slice of the pie, and trying to say, and they're trying to use that to take even more children now by saying, see, parents are bad. It's like, your statistics actually mostly include foster parents, but they've now hidden those statistics somehow. I will keep digging and find them again, because like I said, I had a lot of statistics on this before when I was fighting them, but it seems that they have now went and covered up most of those findings, of course. But the long and short of this, oh, that's another thing too. There are thousands of children that go missing in foster care each year. And the thing is, it basically goes uninvestigated because there aren't any families to look for those children. And so those children just go missing and nobody ever looks for them. I would even, now this might be kind of going out there, but I would even venture to say that there's a lot of children missing right now that nobody knows about, and I'm sure the foster families are still getting a check for them. Just saying. For example, this was something I found. This was like way back in 2012, though. This was the year my son was born. Connecticut police rescued 88 children from sex trafficking, and 86 of them, that's almost 100% of these children, were from the child welfare system, were from foster homes. So I'm just saying, I'm not going to go any further into this right now. Like, I mostly just wanted to present to you guys with the CPS agenda, which I feel like most of it is money motivated by people who appear to have a lot of personality disorders and mental issues, who are the kind of people who are only out for themselves. Like, the idea of CPS is a great idea. It's a great idea to protect children, and it is a great idea to help families, like actually help families. You're supposed to be offering services to these families that if there is an issue, these people receive help and become well so that they can be reunited with their children, not so that you can use whatever they get diagnosed with to take their children and place them into foster care so that you can make more money for the system or yourself. But the long and short of this is that we need CPS to be reformed before every child that we have is raised by the system, because it's starting to look that way. It's expanding more and more and more. Like, I mean, they do mostly prey on poor people, but there are even middle class and upper middle class families that are being targeted by CPS now. Talking about doctors and lawyers, you know, who are being targeted by CPS. And why is this? Again, I think it's because maybe the children from better environments, we'll say, are more adoptable. And also, too, just because they want to control every aspect of a child's life, you know. But anyway, I'm just going to leave that here for now. I know this video is very long, and I'm probably not even going to edit it down because I simply do not have the time to try to do that. It takes forever just to upload a video, let alone to have to edit it first. And I'm using a camera on this one that my boyfriend Alex, he lives in the UK, he left it here for me. And I've never used a camera before. I typically record these on my phone. So this is a learning curve. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you have any questions or would like anything specific for me to look into as far as CPS, please leave them down in the comments below, and I will read them. I will try to respond to you, of course, and I will look into anything else about CPS you would want me to look into. You're also free to share your own theories down below. Various opinions, differing opinions are welcomed. Just please make sure that you are respectful in the comments. Like, don't be threatening to kill CPS workers. We do not need that kind of negative image placed in our battle with CPS at all. And, you know, also don't be coming on here attacking me or anybody in my community. You know, you're free to have a different opinion. Just everyone, please be civilized adults and respectful to one another. Having said that, I hope that you liked this video, and I hope that it was useful and helpful to you. Thank you. Till next time.